Hello again, ladies and gents. I'm Andyb, and this is the Sum 41 Retrospective, and it's the bonus episode! It's been quite a while since the last retrospective video. Well, at least the last proper retrospective video.
First online show ever!
But I'm finally back, and I brought a new episode with me. So in this video, we're going to be talking about bonus tracks. The extra songs typically found on certain CD and vinyl releases of records. Bonus tracks are particularly common for Japanese releases of records recorded by European and North American artists. But why exactly is that? Well, from what I understand, in Japan the cost of importing the international version of the record in many cases is actually cheaper than buying the domestic Japanese version. So these bonus tracks were used to incentivize Japanese consumers to buy these records domestically. So there you go, consider that your fun fact for the episode. I'm gonna go through each of the band's studio records and give my opinions on their respective bonus tracks. Now just to be clear, I'm only looking at the bonus tracks from Sum 41's studio records. This doesn't include tracks from compilations, covers albums, guest appearances, basically anything from a non-Sum 41 studio record will not be covered in this video. Those kinds of tracks can be talked about in a separate video. Hint hint, there might be a part 2. Besides, there's already quite a few bonus tracks from Sum 41's studio records alone. So with all that being said, let's get started. First up, All Killer No Filler. For the band's first record, we've got just one bonus track. Included on the UK release is a re-recorded version of Makes No Difference, Sum 41's debut single from their Half Hour Power EP. If you've seen the first retrospective episode, which you probably have if you're seeing this video, then you'll know I think the original Makes No Difference is a great song. It's an upbeat pop-punk jam with fun riffs and melodies, and it's a prime example of Sum 41's early sound. This re-recorded version is nearly identical to the original, apart from two notable differences. First, the song has been shifted down a half step from the key of E-flat major to D major. The second difference is with the production. This re-recording shares the same great production found on the rest of the All Killer tracks.
Running fast and missing, but cannot help convincing. Running fast and missing, but cannot help convincing. Makes no difference to me. It makes no difference to me.
Other than that, the song remains the same. Personally, I prefer the All Killer version, mostly because of the production and Derek's vocals sounding less nasally. If you like the original and have yet to hear this re-recording, I definitely recommend it. Does This Look Infected features two bonus tracks, which appear on the UK and vinyl releases of the record. Now, if you want to get technical, these bonus tracks aren't performed by Sum 41, but instead Pain for Pleasure, Sum 41's alter ego metal band. During the making of Does This Look Infected, the band planned on releasing a dedicated Pain for Pleasure EP. Unfortunately, due to time constraints, it was never completed. And so these two bonus tracks are the remnants of that scrapped EP. First, we've got Rain and Pain Heavy Metal Jamboree. While their debut single, Pain for Pleasure, was very Iron Maiden-esque, Rain and Pain has more of a classic hard rock sound, reminiscent of bands like Kiss and Twisted Sister. Lyrically, the song's about, well, Pain for Pleasure having a heavy metal jamboree. Going crazy, just fucking rocking out. You could say it's a bit cheesy, but I think that's kind of the point. I mean, we're talking about Sum 41's 80s heavy metal alter egos here. It's very much a gimmick. You can tell the band isn't taking themselves too seriously, but at the same time, their performance is still authentic. Steve-O, or I guess Pain, is still an entertaining vocalist, full of grit and attitude, with a big in-your-face hook, tongue-in-cheek lyrics, and a ripping guitar solo. This track is a whole lot of heavy metal fun. The second track is World War VII, Parts 1 and 2. Out of all of Sum 41's bonus tracks, this one is the longest, clocking in at just over 5 minutes. It's a song where Steve-O, Pain, tells of the impending demise of the human race at the hands of the robot overlords.
Destroy us all!
But according to the opening line, that doesn't happen until at least the year 3468, so we still got time. Part 1 begins with the sounds of an army march, before fading into a clean guitar intro. As the intro progresses, we're met with an ominous guitar harmony, heavy tom hits, and a descending melodic bass line. It's a pretty cool intro, and it gets you excited for what's to come. When part 2 kicks in, the band once again adopts an Iron Maiden-inspired sound. From the galloping rhythm, the guitar harmonies, and its heavy use of a 1-6-7 chord progression, the Maiden influence is upfront and undeniable.
The year is 3468 and they're about to eliminate.
While it's a fairly compelling track, I find it inferior to Heavy Metal Jamboree. My main 2 complaints with the track are that the main riff is pretty generic, and stylistically, it's very derivative. I mean, there's being inspired, and then there's just plain imitating. I think I've mentioned this in a previous episode, but that's one of my main problems with Sum 41. They have a wide range of influences, but at times they wear those influences a bit too hard in their sleeves. With World War VII, they go through all the Iron Maiden cliches, but do little outside of that. Now granted, at least it's a competent Iron Maiden homage. The guys are giving great performances, and Dave's, Pleasure's, backing vocals really complement Steve-O's, no wait, I do mean Payne.
Who are you people?
Pleasure's backing vocals complement Payne's vocals really nicely. Like I said, it's little more than an Iron Maiden imitation, but then again, that's all it's trying to be. I mean, Pain for Pleasure is really Sum 41's tribute to their metal heroes. And as the band once famously said, Maiden and Priest were the gods that they praised. In spite of my gripes, World War VII is a pretty solid track. And after listening to these 2 bonus tracks, I really wish we got that Pain for Pleasure EP. I think it would have been a fun addition to the band's discography. But I guess it was never meant to be. And now all we have to remember it is a World War and a Heavy Metal Jamboree. Starting with the Japanese bonus tracks, our first track is called Newts, and to be frank, I really like this song. I mean, I've used it as background music in every retrospective episode to date. Right from the get-go, one thing I find interesting about this song is that the main riff isn't played on guitar. Now, I've seen multiple covers on YouTube that play this riff on guitar, but if you actually listen closely, it sounds more like a keyboard or a synthesizer. It may seem like a trivial detail, and admittedly it kind of is, but other than Count Your Last Blessings from Underclass Hero, I can't think of another Sum 41 song where the main riff isn't played on guitar. In fact, there's a lot of small elements in this track that Sum 41 don't often use, like the subtle piano notes in the second verse, or the phaser guitar part in the bridge.
So far it's been so hard to cover up these scars.
Again, they may be minor details, but they add up and give Newts its unique identity in the Sum 41 catalog. And the song is tied together by a fantastic chorus, my favorite part of the song. Aside from its catchy melody, I love the mix of screaming and sung vocals in the second half. It creates some really cool vocal layers.
No apologies, I never thought you'd be so bad.
It might interest you to know that Newts was initially part of Chuck's original track list, but towards the end of the writing process, it got scrapped in favor of a new song the band had written after returning home from the Congo. That song was We're All to Blame, which ended up being the first single and one of the most popular songs from Chuck. So I guess it wasn't a bad decision. Fortunately, Newts wasn't totally forgotten about. Other than being a Chuck bonus track, it was also the B-side for the We're All to Blame single, and it was also part of the 2005 Fantastic Four movie soundtrack. So, take that for what it's worth. Now, even though I like this song, I do feel that Newts would be a bit out of place on Chuck. It doesn't have quite the same punk metal aggression as No Reason or The Bitter End, but it's far from being a ballad like Pieces or Slipping Away. I mean, personally, I'd take Newts over I'm Not the One any day, but stylistically, I'm Not the One is more in line with the rest of Chuck. But like I said, I think Newts is a great song, and it's one of my favorite Sum 41 bonus tracks. Now, this track did first appear on Fat Wreck Chords' Rock Against Bush compilation, but it was also included as a bonus track on the Japanese release of Chuck, so I'm not breaking my own rules. As its inclusion on said anti-Bush compilation would imply, this song has a political undertone. And much like with the majority of Sum 41's politically influenced tracks, they opt to talk more about their emotional reactions to the political climate rather than specific policies or events. The lyrics talk about general frustration in the wake of the Bush presidency, talking about being desensitized, in denial, and yet unable to ignore what's happening. The song is fairly short at just about 2 minutes, but it features a distinctive intro bass line, a swinging rhythm, and a catchy chorus.
It's hard enough to even fake a smile. Disillusion, I'm in denial. You can't fake this and I can't take anymore.
It's nothing mind-blowing, but it's short and sweet. The last of the Japanese bonus tracks, Subject to Change, is kind of an anomaly in the Sum 41 discography. Now at face value, it seems like a fairly typical Sum 41 song of its era, with its aggressive metal-influenced riffing, shouted backing vocals, and driving rhythm. From the intro to the chorus, the song has a great sense of dynamics with explosive payoffs.
How can we fake this and take anymore? Look at it blindly and try to ignore. Thanks for making this so easy. What's the point of it? So easy.
Speaking of the chorus, you might find it vaguely familiar.
Because we're doing fine and we don't need to be told. Well, because we're doing fine and we don't need to be told.
As I mentioned in my Underclass Hero episode, this chorus was originally from Subject to Change and was reused 3 years later as the chorus to Underclass Hero. And personally, I think the Underclass version of the chorus is superior. Granted, I'm a bit biased because I heard Underclass Hero first, but the bouncy vibrance of the Underclass version is incredibly catchy. So proto-Underclass chorus aside, why do I consider this song a strange case? Well, that has to do with the song's identity. Now, as far as I know, this has never been officially confirmed, but through speculation and some vague evidence, I'm led to believe that Subject to Change is actually a demo or first-pass version of No Reason. Both songs are played in the same tempo, both songs are in the same key, and both songs have very similar chord progressions and structures.
How can we fake this and take anymore? Look at it blindly and try to ignore. How can we fake this anymore? Thanks for making this so easy. What's the point of it? So easy. Some say it's ignorance. It makes me feel some innocence. Because we're doing fine and we don't need to be told. Can't you see it's not the way?
But some of you might say, well, maybe that's just coincidence. They could have just written 2 songs that sound incredibly similar. And to be fair, that is a possibility. But this is where I'd like to bring this audio clip into evidence, Your Honor. The vocal line in the post-chorus can also be heard during the final chorus of No Reason.
So how long has this gone? I don't see this ending.
My final bit of evidence to suggest the song is a demo is in the track's name itself. Subject to Change may literally reference this song's unfinished state. But like I said, this claim has never been officially confirmed, so you're gonna have to be the judge. But regardless of this song's true identity, Subject to Change is a killer track. It's another fine example of Sum 41's ability to masterfully mix punk and metal sensibilities and get the best of both worlds. That being said, I still prefer No Reason, and I'm glad I made the record instead. But No Reason very well may have not existed if it wasn't for Subject to Change, and I think that alone makes it a valuable part of the Sum 41 discography. For our last Chuck bonus track, and exclusively for the European iTunes release of the record, we get a collaboration rock remix of the Ludacris track, Get Back, the lead single from his 2004 record, The Red Light District. And just like with Chuck, this rock remix was part of the European iTunes release of that record. Now the original track is a hard-hitting rager with a steady groove and one simple message: don't fuck with me. The Sum 41 remix has Ludacris rapping over top guitars instead of keyboard loops and horns. Now admittedly, the guitar and bass riffs aren't anything too special, but the rock instrumentation helps give this song a different type of edge, and there's a nice short guitar solo towards the end. In regards to vocals, Ludacris brings the tongue-in-cheek attitude and big personality he's known for.
Get back, motherfucker, you don't know me like that. Get back, motherfucker, you don't know me like that. But I ain't speaking about ballin', just thinking about brawling till y'all start falling. We all in together now, birds of a feather now. Damn, cause I ain't got nothing to lose and I'm having a bad day. Don't make me take it out on you. Sum 41.
Personally, I kinda prefer this remixed version to the original. And it's not just because Sum 41 is on the track, but because I think this rock remix is a bit more fitting stylistically. Maybe it's just me, but considering how much attitude and aggression are in the vocals and lyrics, I find the original instrumental kind of unfitting. Like, I dig the beat, but it sounds more glamorous than aggressive, if that makes any sense. And what's funny to me is that the vocal delivery on the Sum 41 remix is actually more relaxed in comparison to the original.
Get back, motherfucker, you don't know me like that. Get back, motherfucker, you don't know me like that.
I don't know, I guess those horns just really made him go off.
Heads up.
If you're a Sum 41 fan and or Ludacris fan who hasn't heard this track, then you might just enjoy it.
Get back, motherfucker.
Our first Underclass bonus track is technically not even a bonus track, but rather a hidden track on Underclass Hero. It plays after 2 minutes of silence following the Underclass closer, So Long Goodbye. However, the track is only present on certain editions of the record, which is why I didn't cover it in my Underclass Hero episode. And that partial exclusivity qualifies it as a bonus track in my eyes, so we're covering it. The song seems to be loosely inspired by the John Lennon song of the same name, with both tracks being solo acoustic performances and even sharing some lyrics.
Look at me. Look at me.
This isn't the only Beatles reference made on Underclass Hero. The record's title, Underclass Hero, is also a reference to a John Lennon song called Working Class Hero. But this isn't too surprising to learn, as Derek has expressed his admiration of the Beatles on a number of occasions.
Beatles are my favorite bands.
Bands that I really like that inspire me a lot.
He would have said the Beatles.
And then there's a lot of other bands like the Beatles.
One misconception that I've heard from a few different sources, in fact, is that Cohn sings on this track, which frankly is not true. As far as I can tell, that clearly sounds like Derek. For comparison's sake, here's some bits of Cohn singing in his side project, the Operation MD.
I'm a guy who was screaming in silence. I'm no better than businessmen in black suits. Steal the day, steal the sunshine and rain. Am I the image of your hopes and tragedies? It's not me.
Look at Me is overall a pleasant little acoustic number, save for one flaw. One tiny, okay, less than tiny, okay, huge flaw that really bothers me about this track. And that's the snapping. I shit you not, the first few times I heard this track, I didn't even notice it, but now that I have, I'm surprised I didn't. I mean, it's pretty noticeable in the mix, and the song's minimalistic arrangement only helps to highlight it. I guess it's supposed to add a percussive element to the song, but it just annoys the crap out of me. I mean, So Long Goodbye is another solo acoustic track on this record, and it didn't need unnecessary snapping. But putting that one irritation aside, the core track is still enjoyable. And if the snapping doesn't annoy you, then I guess it's even better. Now this next song's a bit of a strange case, a bit of a wild card if you will, and frankly, I need some backup. I gotta place a call. To who? Nobody. Just the plagiarist police! Oh, that's right, calling all units, we are dealing with a criminal song here. A song called Take a Look at Yourself. Oh, and let me tell ya, if this song was a person, that's what I would be telling it. Take a look at yourself. Feel guilt. And why am I saying this? Because it's a bonus track wanted for multiple cases of theft. First, the intro sounds remarkably similar to the intro of Green Day's Letter Bomb. Second, the verse bears a notable resemblance to the verse section of My Chemical Romance's Welcome to the Black Parade.
Sometimes I get the feeling she's watching over me, and other times I feel like I should go. When teachers always told me that I had to have a plan, but they're preaching something they don't understand.
And third, the pre-chorus has rhythmic similarities to the chorus of Blink-182's Man Overboard.
You can only lean on me for so long, bring the ship about, to watch a friend trust right into the road, and watch my ends bleed, flip me to a cross, and crucify me.
And this is all back to back in the first minute, and that brings the counter to 2. for number of times that Sum 41 has sounded like My Chemical Romance on Underclass Hero.
If I had a nickel for every time
Sum 41 has sounded like My Chemical Romance on Underclass Hero.
I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice, right?
And it kind of sucks, because if this was a truly original song, then I would have said it was decently good. The lyrics feature the same level of detail and bite found on the majority of Underclass Hero, and I do like these different sections, the intro, the verse, the pre-chorus. But I also liked these sections in the originals too. In fact, more so the originals, because, that's where they came from. I'm all for giving benefit of the doubt, but I'm sorry, I do not believe these are pure coincidences. The stark similarities between the parts and the fact that these were other notable pop-punk bands really lends to the idea that Sum 41 were taking from their contemporaries. But is it really worse than the kingpin of Sum 41 plagiarism that is The Bitter End, also known as Battery 2.0? Well, no, I don't think it's that bad. Take a Look at Yourself at least has a couple of original bits, specifically the bridge riff and the admittedly catchy chorus. But I'll be damned if it isn't a close second. The Bitter End may have thoroughly ripped off one song in its majority, but seeing how this track takes pieces from multiple different sources, I'd say Take a Look at Yourself is Sum 41's most diverse case of plagiarism. When I was younger, I remember quite liking this track, and revisiting it years later, I can understand why. It's got an upbeat energy, a fun poppy chorus, and a simple yet enjoyable guitar solo.
I've heard it before, I'm straight out of line. The image of malice with one evil mind. Here's my resignation from the desperation. I'm the state of hopeless, I'll make no apologies.
It's an overall decent track, but it's really nothing special. If this was included on Underclass Hero, it would do little more than pad out the runtime. And finally, there's This Is Goodbye, and yeah, it's pretty unremarkable. It's a straightforward pop-punk affair sporting fast drum power chords and sugary melodies.
Take a look around you, consequence surrounds you. I would cross my heart and hope to die. Goodbye, this is goodbye. So nice to know ya, time has come and gone.
I mean, it's an okay track, but there's nothing about it that demands it goes on the record. You'll notice that's a theme with these Underclass bonus tracks. I mean, I guess their selection of bonuses was appropriate, as these last 3 tracks really do feel like extras. The next track comes from the Japanese Sum 41 Greatest Hits record, 8 Years of Blood, Sake, and Beers. Or as it was called internationally, All the Good Shit. You gotta love how that Japanese charm was just thrown right out the window. Now once again, technically this isn't a bonus track, but rather an unreleased track from the Underclass Hero sessions. But similar to Look at Me, it was only included on certain versions of this Greatest Hits record. And being that it was recorded during the Underclass Hero sessions, you can kind of look at it like another Underclass bonus track. If you squint a little bit and, maybe look at it from a different angle and, kind of just maybe... Alright, look, we're covering it and that's final. Always is a lively pop-punk love song in which Derek proclaims he'll always be there for you. Well, not you specifically, but whoever he's singing about. Considering it was the Underclass Hero era, it was most likely Avril. In regards to composition, the track features many key elements found throughout Underclass Hero, from its prominent use of piano to its rich backing harmonies.
Always, the whole way through.
The driving verse and chorus lead us to my favorite section of the song, the post-chorus section. It's got a simple yet groovy call-and-response guitar riff and a nice descending vocal melody halfway through. The track has a number of good qualities, but I have 2 main problems with it. First off, similar to the other love songs on Underclass Hero, the lyrics are somewhat basic. Despite penning some of his most detailed lyrics in this era, Underclass Derek's love song lyrics are akin to Hallmark Valentine's Day cards. And second, the song features this repeating hit of a high A note on piano. And while I think it's fine for the verse section, I hate how it plays throughout majority of this song. Especially as we transition into the bridge, it becomes incredibly repetitive and irritating. It's like the song's trying to move on to new musical territory, but it's being held back by this one note. Honestly, with a bit of polish and rewriting, I think Always would have made a fine addition to Underclass Hero. If this track was put on the record in place of Best of Me, I wouldn't have minded. Screaming Bloody Murder features 2 bonus tracks from the iTunes and Japanese versions of the record. Now this is the first of many acoustic bonus tracks over the next few records, and I want to use this section to talk generally about my feelings towards these Sum 41 acoustic bonus tracks, and in some way, a bulk of acoustic covers in general. Now first and foremost, I am not against acoustic covers. They can provide a raw and unique rendition of original tracks. But that is when they're done well. Most standard run-of-the-mill acoustic covers I find to be lackluster, and that's because they tend to strip away a lot of a song's musical interest. Specifically when it's just a singer and an acoustic guitar, there's a limited number of melodic voices at your disposal. I get the idea of removing the bells and whistles and stripping a track down to its bare essentials, but sometimes the so-called bells and whistles are part of the original track's charm. I mean, there's being stripped back, and then there's just being naked. And this Reason to Believe acoustic version is an example of the latter. For the intro, the bombastic fuzzy guitars are replaced with soft singing and strum chords, which is appropriate.
I've been waiting for something for so long.
But the moment in the original where the band kicks into high gear and the verse takes off is instead a drop-off in the acoustic version, as it features palm-muted chords and Derek whispering the verse.
Yeah, give me reason to believe.
The song is already low energy enough as it is, but now you've dropped the energy that much more. And the sad thing is that Sum 41 had done better acoustic covers prior to this one. On the Japanese leg of their Chuck tour, the band released a Japanese exclusive EP featuring acoustic versions of songs from Does This Look Infected and Chuck. Specifically Pieces, No Brains, Over My Head, Some Say, and There's No Solution. Most of these acoustic versions were also included on other single and promotional CDs in different regions. And I really like this acoustic EP, and a big reason for that is because these tracks are full band acoustic covers. Listening to these covers, you really start to appreciate what multiple instruments and voices bring to the table, and you also start to mourn what's lost when they're taken out. Like the interconnecting guitar and bass riffs of Over My Head, or the vocal layering in the bridge of No Brains. If these were just solo acoustic performances, these sections would feel emptier and, well, frankly, not as good.
What happened to you? You played the victim for so long now in this game. You speak for all of us when you can't be heard. Some say we're never meant to grow up. I'm sure they never knew enough. Think before you make up your minds. You don't seem to realize. Am I out of my mind? Maybe nothing else will ever be so clear.
These Chuck-era acoustic covers are actually worth listening to separate to the originals. They stand on their own as something different and worthwhile. But in the case of Reason to Believe acoustic, there's very little reason to give this one a listen.
Why are you just making puns?
The next track is a Japanese bonus track called We're the Same. And to be frank, the Japanese got the better of the 2 tracks. The first thing I'd like to note is that this track was co-written by Cone. Although Derek is the band's primary songwriter, it's always nice to see another band member make a significant songwriting contribution. Now Cone's contribution is evident right from the start, as the track opens with a killer groovy bass line. After some clean guitar picking, the main riff finally kicks in. And the main riff, from the guitar tone to the melody itself, has a bit of a western feel to it. Now before you think the band has become the Cowboys from Canada, this western feel is only really in the riff. The track is fairly simple, but well executed. It's got some good vocal melodies, groovy melodic bass lines, and a guitar solo that, had it been on the record, would have been my favorite on the record.
'Cause through those eyes of yours, you see just what you wanna see. Pieces of all your shattered dreams. We're the same in all different ways. Take a look around.
Honestly, my biggest issue with this song is the fact that it's a bonus track. Maybe it was written late into the process, or the band just didn't connect with it like the other tracks. But man, do I wish this was on the record. I mean, there are tracks on the standard release that I would trade in a heartbeat for We're the Same. I mean, Jessica Kill? More like Jessica's getting killed and kicked off this record. Time for you to go? Yeah, you got that right, buddy. What am I to say? I don't know, I think you're kind of a filler track and you probably should move over, buddy, because I want We're the Same! I mean, sure, it sounded different from the majority of Screaming Bloody Murder, but unlike the case with Newts and Chuck, the record has songs that stray from its core sound, like Time for You to Go and Baby You Don't Wanna Know, so I think it wouldn't feel too out of place. Overall, We're the Same is a solid Sum 41 bonus track, and it's one of my personal favorites. Fittingly for the band's 6th release, we've got 6 different bonus tracks across all the different versions. This track is actually pretty similar to Moron, being in the same key, having the same swing rhythm, and also being a fairly short track. I think there's a bit more musical interest here, with Better Days having a better verse melody, and even having a guitar solo. But I'm also docking it some points for being somewhat derivative of Moron. It's an overall half-decent track. While it isn't bad by any means, compared to the other tracks on 13 Voices, Black Eyes isn't anything too special. I like the build-up of the verses, and the chorus is pretty good.
I've been trying to break the only link in the chain. I've been pleading the fifth cause I got nothing to say. Is this I say to you? I'm bleeding out my heart.
But none of the riffs really stand out to me, and personally, I think Derek's screams in the bridge are kinda scratchy sounding. I know Derek's voice has changed over the years, from surgery and just from aging, but just compare these screams to the ones on We're All to Blame, and it's like night and day. Black Eyes is an okay track, but I don't see myself revisiting it too often. Having an acoustic version of this record's featured ballad seems like an obvious choice. And yeah, it's an acoustic version of War, not much else to say about it. Another acoustic cover, same deal. You know, the riff in the bridge was one of my favorite parts of the original track. Yeah, that's not in this version. Next. Here we have another version of War, this time featuring Taka Moriuchi from Japanese rock band One OK Rock. I can't really say much about the band, as I haven't really heard any of their music. I remember hearing about them back in 2017 when their album Ambitions was new, but other than that, I can't really say much. Taka's vocal contributions start with the second verse and continue with the remaining choruses.
Another day in the right direction. I'm okay, but I'm left to question. How did I get so far behind the rest? What am I fighting for? Everything back and forth. Working for a better way. But some days it just gets so hard, and I don't wanna slip away.
His voice pairs nicely with Derek's, and I think it makes for a fine addition to the track. But other than the added vocals, the song remains the same. If you're a fan of One OK Rock, or just curious to hear a different version of War, then I'd say give this track a listen, you might just like it. Although no strangers to covers during live shows, this is the first time Sum 41 have included a studio-recorded cover on one of their records. On multiple occasions, Derek has expressed his love of Elvis Costello.
Did he say Elvis Costello?
Like Elvis Costello.
I'm pretty sure he did.
So him wanting to cover one of his songs isn't too surprising. Now, compared to the other solo guitar covers, I enjoyed this one the most, for a few different reasons. One of which simply being that I like the original track. The vocal melodies are pleasant, each section of the song has a distinctive chord progression, and since the main riff is chord-based, it works well for a solo guitar cover, where the bulk of the guitar work is just chords.
Tuning in the shine on the light night dial, doing anything my radio advised. Radio is a sound salvation. Radio is cleaning up the nation.
In spite of it being a solo guitar performance, this cover still retains some of the musical interest of the Costello original. Even though I like this cover fine enough, I can definitely see why it was a bonus track. Given the darker tone of 13 Voices, this more upbeat track would feel really out of place. If you're interested in hearing Derek sing this track, I'd say give it a listen. But if you want the full, and in my opinion best experience, then I'd say stick to the Costello original. For For the 7th and latest Sum 41 record, as of this video, we've got just 2 bonus tracks for the Target and Japanese releases of this record, and it's just acoustic versions of Heads Will Roll and Catching Fire.
Fuck yeah!
Yeah, I kinda wish we could end on something more interesting, but, you know, this is what I got. Honestly, I'm surprised that Never There wasn't given the acoustic treatment. I mean, that song is prime for acoustification. But I'm kinda glad they didn't just pick the ballads. I mean, that's the obvious choice. Unfortunately, these acoustic bonus tracks, much like the others, are nothing too special. First up, Heads Will Roll Acoustic. Now I'll give this track a bit of credit, as it does feature a few tiny embellishments. Alongside the guitar and vocals, there's some clapping and some kick drums.
You've got me thrown, this time's no mystery.
I mean, it's not much, but it's something, I guess. Aside from that, it's a pretty straightforward acoustic cover. And I don't know if I'm just imagining things, but to me, it sounds like they ripped the vocals from the original and just placed it over top this acoustic instrumental.
Keep yourself in line. Well, don't be foolish. Keep yourself in line. Now you don't want to make me lose my shit, 'cause heads will roll. Now you don't want to make me lose my shit, 'cause heads will roll.
Which, if they did, is pretty lazy of them. This arrangement is already sparse enough as it is, and reusing the same vocal gives me even less reason to listen to this track over the original. And finally, there's Catching Fire Acoustic. Now, as I admitted in my Order in Decline review, I'm not the biggest fan of Catching Fire. Although I respected its sentiment and message, musically it didn't do much for me. I thought the original track was pretty bare bones in terms of composition, so this version with just acoustic guitar and xylophone doesn't fare much better.
Now I'm here alone, without you by my side. And if I failed you, well, I swear I tried my best.
I suppose playing it as a solo acoustic performance gives it a more intimate feel, but at its core, it's still the same track. Not much else to say. And that, ladies and gents, is all the bonus tracks from Sum 41's studio records, at least to date. Overall, these bonus tracks were kind of a mixed bag. There were some duds, but there also were some gems, with my personal favorite bonus tracks being Rain and Pain, Newts, and We're the Same. But to be honest, even my least favorite bonus tracks were more unimpressive than outright terrible. I can only get so upset about tracks that are literal extras. I mean, I'd rather the bonus tracks be bad than the standard record tracks. Because whether they be good or bad, these bonus tracks don't really impair my enjoyment of the respective records. Since they're added onto the end of the record, the original track list is still intact. So at their worst, bonus tracks are unnecessary tail ends that can be easily ignored. And at their best, they're welcome additions that give you more good tracks to enjoy. And with that, I think I've said my piece. So as per usual, I'm Andyb, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if I make another, I'll see you then. Take it easy.